Good evening and welcome to our final national virtual gathering for 2025. We always take the month of December off, so that's why this is our last one for the year. So anyway, this is live streamed on the first Wednesday of every month at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central. And then this live stream is recorded. It's posted in our VIP vault for 2 weeks, and then it goes live to the public on our YouTube channel in 2 weeks. So head over to YouTube. Our sign is the ampersand or at nlhg.org, and you can catch all of the replays. We have about over 45 national virtual gatherings there for you to catch up on at your leisure. So the National Ladies Homestead Gathering is a national nonprofit where we try to encourage community and homesteading. So whether you have just planters on your back patio, if you're an urban homesteader and you just have some chickens, or you have dairy goats or cows, everyone is welcome. You don't even have to be a gardener or have any animals if you're into canning. Our goal is to teach women how to do things at home instead of going out to get them. So, I think a lot of people feel the term homesteader applies to you have to have this massive farm, and that is further from the truth. As long as we're doing things at home instead and learning new skills, you are a homesteader. So the purpose of the National Ladies Homestead Gathering is to empower women through homesteading, and our mission is to share knowledge, build community, and grow friendships. So my name's Nancy, and I have the pleasure of serving as the media director on the executive team for NLHG, and I am so glad you're all here tonight. Okay, a couple announcements before we get with our speaker. So our sponsor this month, our VIP partner sponsor, is LEM Products. They're a trusted leader in home meat and game processing. So if you need any tools for any of your meat game processing, they have items for chicken coops and so forth. You can head over to LEM and check them out. And for our VIPs, they are in the VIP vault, and there is a code. They offer all of our VIPs a 20% discount on your total purchase. So that's a really great offer. And if you're not a VIP and you're interested in becoming a VIP, you could head over to our website, www.nlhg.org, and it's just $35 a year. It helps support this beautiful nonprofit organization, and you get some great discounts and access to special resources in our private VIP vault here on Mighty Networks. All right, so just a couple housekeeping things. Please post your questions in the chat. We'll be collecting questions throughout Cassidy's presentation, and then at the end of the presentation, we'll have about 10 minutes to go over some Q&A. So I want to welcome tonight's guest speaker. Her name is Cassidy Cornell, and let me go click on her to invite her to the chat here. So while Cassidy is joining, I'm just going to let you know that I met her at the Modern Homesteading Conference here in North Idaho this summer. She was working at the Murray McMurray Hatchery booth, and I started talking to her about chickens, and I found her just to be a joy and asked her if she would mind being one of our guest speakers, and she eagerly jumped at the chance. So I'm really excited to have her on tonight. Hi, Cassidy.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I kind of gave you a little introduction. Do you want to do a further little bio about yourself? And then I'll ask you a couple questions before you get started.
Yeah, of course. So hi, everyone. I'm Cassidy Cornell. I'm over in Eastern Washington. So I'm super close to the Idaho border. I'm about 30 minutes away. And I always tell people at the beginning of these kinds of things that I'm a wife and mom first and foremost. And number one, I'm saying that right now because you might hear my kids or my washing machine in the background. But also because everything I do stems from those two roles. And so I really got into homesteading because I wanted to feed my husband and my children the best food possible And through a journey of becoming closer with my food and the food that I feed my family, I really realized that the best way to feed them the best food was to grow and make and produce as much as I could on my own. But that being said, we weren't really in a position, nor are we now, to go out and buy 5, 10, even more acres. We ended up finding an acre property in a suburban neighborhood here in Spokane Valley. And we have been so blown away by all that we can do here. And so I'm really excited to share about that with you guys.
That's amazing. So I just want to let everyone know this is Cassidy's new book. I'm sure she's going to share it a little bit later with us. I just got my copy today in the mail. And when we were kind of going over getting to know each other and preparing for this session, I found out that everything Cassidy is doing is exactly in line with what I want. I want a small garden, some chickens, some dairy goats. So I'm really excited to have her book as a new resource. So anyway, okay, 2 quick questions. So what does homesteading mean to you personally, and how has it shaped your everyday life?
Homesteading means to me personally, kind of like I touched on earlier, just doing what I'm able to at home. And for me, it's not necessarily about the desire to be self-sufficient. It's the desire to do what I can. But homesteading to me also really has a broader sense of community as well. And so it's also kind of shaped my life by bringing me closer to a lot of people who have taught me about the skills that I've learned throughout this process, because by and large, I'm pretty self-taught. This isn't something that is done in my family. So yeah, I would say those are my 2 things. It means doing what I can at home, but also it's the privilege of being part of a larger community.
I love that. And I think what you're saying is really going to resonate with a lot of us, you know, not having that upbringing, but still having that desire to learn some of the old ways and bringing that back into our life. So that's great.
Yeah.
And then what first inspired you to get into chickens? And then what has kept you hooked ever since?
So actually, before my husband and I lived here in Eastern Washington, we lived in Western Washington, and it was a very small house. And one night my husband came home and he said, I think we should watch this movie. I saw a documentary. I think you would really like it. It was Biggest Little Farm. And for those of you who have seen that, I watched that movie and I was just like enamored with it because I'm a lifeliner. And so did I freeze there? Am I better?
It got jittery.
Good.
But you're good.
So I saw that movie, and as a lifelong animal lover, I was just totally enamored with the idea of this family living in community with the animals that they took care of, and that also took care of them, and being part of that cycle. And so that night when I went to bed, my husband stayed up later. I got on Pinterest and I made a secret board about chickens, and I got super obsessed with the idea of keeping chickens, but it just was not feasible for us at that phase of our life. Well, it was, but in that moment I thought that it was not feasible for us. And so we moved over here to Eastern Washington, and I started getting really involved, like I said, in the food that we were eating. And so we were buying pasture-raised eggs. We were purchasing our meat from a ranch that, you know, it was people that we knew and we trusted. We were buying our milk from local dairies, and eggs seemed to be like the one thing that I could take over, because at that time we were living on 1/3 of an acre. And so that was really what got me started into chickens, was seeing that documentary, but also, you know, getting involved in my food and wanting to be part of it myself instead of just being beholden to others. And the thing that has kept me hooked on chickens, I love their personalities. They're a very fun creature to own and to bond with, but more than that, they feed my kids, and eggs are something that they're a huge staple of our diet. I'm a big baker. My kids love scrambled eggs in the morning. I put eggs in our hot chocolate. We eat a lot of eggs as a family, and I take great comfort in knowing that the eggs that my children eat are of very, very high quality, because they're such a big part of our diet, but also because they are pretty much the easiest livestock animal to keep possible. And so if something were to happen, I know I can always have chickens and we'll always have that type of food to rely on.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I second your feelings about the Biggest Little Farm. I saw that years ago, and I think that's what inspired me as well. So, okay, I'm going to go ahead and let you get on with your presentation. Thank you so much.
All right. So I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to go into slideshow. Are we good here? Does that look good to everybody?
Yep, it looks great.
Okay. Thanks, Nancy. All right, so as Nancy touched on, I do work for McMurray Hatchery, and that's a job that I really love and I'm super passionate about. If you haven't heard of McMurray Hatchery, we're a small family-owned hatchery out of Webster City, Iowa. And something that we do at the beginning of every season is that we open a pre-order. So I'm going to touch a little bit on how and why the pre-ordering process works. And then also we're going to talk a little bit about best practices for brooding and caring for your chicks as they grow into layers. So the first thing that you want to consider when you're placing an order for chicks, and I think this is really important, even if you have had a flock of chickens before, is to identify your goals. So if you want strictly eggs, that's going to be a specific set of breeds of chickens. If you want strictly meat, that's going to be a different deal. Dual purpose, that's a flock where they can provide both meat and eggs, and a sustainable flock is a type of flock that can reproduce and raise their own young naturally so that you don't really have to have a lot of inputs into that cycle. Some other things that you might want would be like pest control, help in the garden, or if you are passionate about raising chicks but you don't really want to have an incubator. That's me. I don't like using an incubator. So I select certain breeds of chickens because I know that they will raise their chicks for me. Then you also want to think about your constraints. So that's things like space, the amount of time you have to work on things with your chickens, your predator load, the feed conversion, and the rate of lay of your hens that you want in the future. So once you identify some of those things, you're going to also run into the idea of production versus heritage. So production breeds are chickens that are hybrids, and they've been specifically bred over several generations. They're specific crosses to produce the maximum amount of eggs in the first 2 years of their life. So I personally always make sure, because eggs are my number one goal with my flock, is that half of my flock at all times is a production breed or a mix of production breeds. And then heritage birds these are breeds that are chickens that would have been around on your great-great-great-grandparents' farm. They have natural foraging skills, they can reproduce naturally, they breed true, they have high pest resistance, and they've become really well suited to survive and thrive in the areas where they have evolved over centuries. So when you're looking at that, you're going to get into the classes of chickens. So there are 6. There's the American class. Those were obviously developed here in America, Asiatic, continental, English, Mediterranean, and then all other. All other just means literally all other types of chickens that don't fall into those categories. So for our area, the birds that I recommend the most come from the American and English classes. Those birds are generally very heat and cold tolerant. They have good personalities. They're good egg layers, especially in the American class. They will often persist through cold weather, which is an important factor where I live. So kind of thinking about where you live is going to determine which class of chickens you want to focus on. For folks who are living in really, really hot areas, you're going to want to look at the Mediterranean breeds and sometimes the continental breeds. And also for people who are really particularly interested, like I am, in never using an incubator, I really recommend chickens from the Asiatic class, notably the Brahma and the Cochin. They're really good mothers. And then you also want to think about your flock size. As we all know, unfortunately, where you have livestock, you have dead stock. And I always like to over judge my chicken needs than to underjudge, especially because they take a bit of time to grow out. So I recommend to people to get at least 2 to 6 chicks more than they think they're going to want to end up with. So if I know that for my family, I want 10 chickens, I would probably suggest ordering 12 to 15 or 16, because chances are, just as if they were brooded and hatched at home, 1 or 2 won't make it. And then also, you're going to want to think about things like, do you have a predator load? Chicks are an easy target, particularly if they don't have a mom. But the nice thing about over budgeting for your flock size when you're ordering chicks is that if you end up with extra hens at the end of the raising process, they're generally really easy to sell, especially those of you who are in my area. Hens at point of lay go for a really, really good price right now, and it's a pretty easy and economical way to make back some of your money in feed to raise a few extra hens and then sell them. So step 2 is going to be ordering chicks. Obviously, I recommend McMurray Hatchery. Our pre-orders are open now. So pre-orders are pretty cool because it's the best way to ensure that you have a good chance of getting the breeds that you want. We always sell out very quickly, notably because even though we are a hatchery and we do produce chicks in a large volume, we focus very highly on quality over quantity. So we're not hatching out the same number of chicks that the mega hatcheries are, but so we do sell out pretty quickly. Another benefit is that it gives you a lot more flexibility when you're picking the date they arrive. So for example, if I set a pre-order now, which I like to do every year, even though I work for the hatchery, I always set a pre-order for my birthday because I love going to the post office my birthday week and picking up a box of baby chicks. However, if I'm doing that last minute and I go in, I might see that, oh no, there's nothing available the week of my birthday, or oh no, the breeds I want are not available the week of my birthday. So this gives you a much better chance to get the breeds that you want. And I think this is really important, especially for first-time chicken owners or for people who are really digging in deep and identifying the needs and goals that they have for their homestead to make sure they're getting the perfect breeds that suit their needs. Another thing I want to point out is that you always have the choice regarding vaccines, which is not necessarily the case if you're picking up chicks like from Tractor Supply or something like that. I can't speak for the vaccination process at other hatcheries, but when you order at McMurray Hatchery, you always get to pick if your chicks are vaccinated or not. And then I always recommend that you opt into the Quick Chick and Grow Gel. Quick Chick is just some vitamins and electrolytes, and you can totally make your own if you have a recipe at home, but this is just a really quick way to put some into a water and give some to chicks first thing when they arrive. And then I like to keep the rest of the packet on hand. And if I have a hen that's unwell, I'll use that as a little boost. And Grow Gel is very hydrating. It's this bright green kind of jello-y looking substance, and it goes on to their feed, and the green attracts them to their feed. They see that color, like grass. They see that color and they want to go peck at it and insect. So it helps give them that positive association with finding and eating their feed while providing them with another boost of hydration and nutrients. And those two things are something I always do when I start my chicks out. Step 3 is you want to prepare for their arrival. So when you're setting up, you need to have a brooder. I just recently switched over to these very nice raised, I think they're like raised garden beds. We got them at Home Depot. I really, really like them, but for many years, I just brooded in plastic totes. So whatever you can find works. You want to fill that with bedding, as seen here. This is large flake. I prefer large flake bedding because it doesn't kick up as much dust, and then inevitably it will get in these little waterers, and it's really easy to just scoop it out like that. You also need a feeder and a waterer. I like these trough style feeders. These are ducks. My chicks are all hiding under the brooding plate in this, but I like these trough style feeders. They have a little anti-perch bar, and it just makes it a lot easier for them to all eat at the same time. And then waterers. For the first few days, I like my chicks to have these very shallow, small waterers, and I like this kind for ducks. And then I eventually move on to this kind for chicks. And you want a heat source. So there are 2 types of heat sources you can work with. You can do a heating plate, which is pictured here. I really like these. They mimic the natural ambiance of going beneath a mama hen, and they're also not a fire hazard. So I brood all of my chicks in my garage, And so I do not ever use heat bulbs in my garage because they are a fire hazard. That being said, Premier One has a new standout that I saw for the first time at Homesteaders of America the beginning of the month. And it's a 3-legged stand, and it has the bulb in it and a big plastic cage, and if it falls over, it has an automatic off. So that's definitely something to keep in mind if you are someone who prefers a heat bulb. I also like to have my feed ready to go, particularly starter. You don't need to have grower until they're a bit earlier, but I like to have my starter at my house and ready probably a week before they arrive. I also like to make sure I have the next sizes of equipment ready. So like I mentioned, I start with very small waterers for my chicks, and then I move up to these. You can start with a waterer like this. It doesn't really matter. But one notable difference I like to say is that when my chicks hit about 2 weeks old, I switch them over to nipple waterers. And this is a total game changer for keeping your brooder clean because they get bedding in their water, they tip it over, it spills everywhere, and wet bedding is a recipe for things like coccidiosis and pneumonia. And so if you retain anything from the equipment that you need, it's find a nipple waterer that you can switch them to around the 2-week mark. And it's very easy. You just hold them gently and kind of push their beaks into the nipple waterer, and they feel it and they drink it really easily. They're very easy to train. And then if you've never ordered chicks before, something I recommend in preparation is to call your post office about a week ahead of time, and then maybe a day before they're supposed to arrive. I've never had problems with my post office. I know some people who have, but at this point, they know me very well. They know that I get a lot of birds. And so I've always had a very pleasant experience. But I feel that part of that is because I kind of inserted myself and was just like, hey, this is me. I have birds coming. How does this work? And usually once they are on that level of familiarity with you, they'll kind of go out of their way to make sure that you get a call ASAP when the chicks come in. So for arrival, when I leave for the post office, I turn my heat source on so that when I get home, it's already warmed up and ready to go. I like to give them warm water with electrolytes, so that's the quick chick. You could also do honey or molasses in some warm water. And you want to dip each chick's beak into the waterer. So over here, very gently. That teaches them where the water is, trains them to their water source, and then you can put them in the brooder. When I first get my chicks, I like to sit and watch for a few minutes to make sure that everybody's drinking really well before I offer a bunch of food, because their food is water soluble. The vitamins and minerals in their food is water soluble. So if they're not hydrated, they're not going to digest it as well. And then they're going to be spending more calories on getting warm versus if they're well hydrated and then they start to eat, they're going to digest that food a lot better and they won't have to divert as many calories towards staying warm, which is the most important job for a baby chick. So watch them for like 2 or 3 minutes, make sure everybody is hydrated, and then you can move on to food. You also really want to pay attention to their sound, and this is the most important, I would say, during the first couple of days, but anytime you have livestock animals, this is beneficial. If sound and behavior, so if there's loud peeping, that means something is wrong. So if I hear a really loud peeping, I go out to my garage where I brood and I check things out. If they're piled up in corners away from a heat source, they're too hot. If they're huddled together under the heat and not moving and kind of squishing into each other, they're too cold. Or if they're kind of evenly distributed, like you can see here, and making just very gentle peeping and trilling sounds, that means they're happy. So basics for brooding, you want the brooder temp at like 90 to 95 degrees for the first week, and then you can drop it about 5 degrees every week after that until the chicks are fully feathered. But to do that, you raise, that should say heat, sorry. You raise the heat lamp or adjust the brooder plate. So with the brooder plate, you just kind of swirl the legs and it pops up a little higher. And for the brooder plate, I like it to be able to just touch their heads. You also want your brooder to be in a ventilated but draft-free area. Ventilation is really important for poultry in terms of respiratory health, but if it's too drafty, they'll get very cold. So that's why I like those tall-sided garden boxes that I showed earlier, because even if my garage were to have, some drafts in it, the chicks are very well protected. Brooding outside versus inside. So the first time I ever brooded chicks, I did it in January, and I did it in my basement and then my garage. I did it in my basement for a long, long time. Chicks are very dusty and very messy after the first probably week. They're super fun to have inside for that first week, but after that, for me, I definitely prefer to brood outside. And so, like I said, I do that in my garage. So if you're brooding outside, I recommend doing it in a fully enclosed space that has access to electricity for your heat source. And also you want to make sure if you're doing it outside, it can't be the dead of winter. So maybe some people do that with success. I don't feel comfortable putting baby chicks out in my garage when it's super cold. So I like the nighttime temps if I'm brooding outside to be at least 40 degrees, for example. So that also does kind of dictate when I order and time my chicks. For feed, you want to give them starter feed from about 0 to 8 weeks. Juveniles are going to get grower from about 8 to 16, and from 16 weeks and up, you want to switch over to a layer feed so that they're getting that complete nutrition to prepare for their point of lay. And then also something that I think is beneficial to mention is you should handle your chicks regularly, even if you don't really plan to be the type of chicken lady who's like picking her chickens up and snuggling them. I don't necessarily do that, but it really helps to have your chickens associate you with positive things, to be able to handle them if they have something like bumblefoot, or if they have twine that they got tied up in, or if they're injured, to be able to quickly grab them and have them be calm while you're assessing them. So handling them from a young age really, really helps. Transitioning outside, this is something that I think people really rush, and it can be really detrimental to the health of your chicks, even if it doesn't look like even if it is cold out and it looks like maybe they're handling it well, it can definitely it can hinder their growth later on. So I like to use a transitional brooder to get them outside and on grass as soon as possible. So you can kind of see that here. And here is that same run attached to an actual coop for them to sleep in. This system requires a bit of work and forethought, and also extension cords, but it's worth it because I think that any animal benefits from being on grass as soon as they're born, pretty much. I like my daytime temps to be about 50 or above in order to take them outside. And I also, like I said, use an extension cord to get a heat plate out there if I need to. And then you're going to gradually transition them to be sleeping outside when the nighttime temps are 50 or above and the chicks are fully feathered. Usually that's around 6 to 8 weeks of age. If you have an enclosed coop or run with no other chickens, at that point when they're ready to be moved outside, you can just lock your chicks in that coop and help them figure out the ramp and going to roost, and it's really easy that way. If not, you'll have to help round them up into the coop for a few nights before they catch on. But chickens imprint on structures. That's why they go to coop at night. So once they have that routine down, it's pretty easy. And then you also really want to make sure, especially when they're babies, that they are roosting on their bars and not sleeping in nest boxes. Because then that means they're pooping in the nest boxes at night, and then they're laying eggs in poopy nest boxes. And it's harder to break that habit when they're older. Introducing new chickens. So with chicks, you can give them to a broody hen if you trust her, or if you are introducing them yourself, if it's a batch of chicks that you have raised and you have an existing chicken flock, you want to keep them in an area where your hens can see them but not necessarily touch them. So you can kind of see over here, this is my quail coop. This is my transition coop for these chicks, and then my old chickens run was right behind it, and so they could see each other for quite a while and not touch each other. And then gradually I just kind of let them out and to be together. For juveniles and adults, so like pullets or actual hens, you can also do the transitional coop thing where they can look but not touch for a few days. But if you fully trust the source, someone that you got your chickens from, like not just a random stranger on Craigslist. For example, I have a really good friend here who's a breeder. If I get a chicken from her, an adult chicken, I just walk it out to my coop at nightfall. I put it on a roosting bar, close the coop up as normal, and walk away. And then everybody wakes up and they're like, oh, cool, you've always been here. When you are introducing new members to your flock, there is going to be some pecking order to be established, and that's pretty normal. I find that introducing hens to a new flock is a lot easier if you have a rooster in place. Usually roosters do not like their ladies to squabble. And then also when you're introducing new members of your flock, this is important if you're not in a free range setting already. So at this house where these photos were taken, my hens had a coop and run. But when I introduced new chickens, I would open that up and let them all forage in our yard, because having that mental stimulation kind of diverted their attention from the newcomers and made them focus on doing something else together. Another thing I want to bring up is that it's really important to cycle your layers. And here's how I do it. It might be a little different for you depending on your weather and your location, but the general idea will still ring true. So I do 2 batches of chicks a year. I time the first arrival to be for early spring in April or May, and those hens will begin to lay in September or October. That's really good timing because that's when my core flock goes into molt, so they slow down. And normally I would not have any eggs at that time when my flock goes into a full molt, but because I have those pullets that are hitting lay, I'm getting fresh eggs from new layers right away. The second batch that I get, I time their arrival for late summer, early fall, August or September. I did August this year and I really liked that. They'll begin to lay in January or February, and that's important because it gives your egg basket a really nice boost before spring hits, and also it's really good for your mental health, especially in our area, at least for me, when it's just been cold and snowy for months on end. To go out to the coop and have a brand new egg from a pullet, I love that feeling. Hens remain in my flock for 2 to 3 years max, and then I either sell them or process them as spent hens for soups and stews and broth. The last thing that I'm going to touch on really quick is that I'm doing a giveaway just for you guys, and it runs through the 18th. I think we said, right, Nancy? If I'm wrong, please say something. So all you have to do to enter is follow me on Instagram. I'm at the Halftime Homestead. If you don't have an Instagram, you can just shoot me an email at Cassidy@McMurrayHatchery.com. And so the 2 things that you'll win, one is my book, which Nancy touched on earlier. So I just wrote a book that it's called The 1 Acre Homestead, and it's about everything that we do here on our farm, on our suburban acre. So we raise a very sizable flock of laying chickens. We keep ducks for eggs as well. I currently also have turkeys and geese. I typically keep quail, but I don't keep them in the fall and winter. I don't overwinter them. And we also do 2 batches of Cornish cross every year for meat. And then we raise dairy goats for our dairy needs and sometimes for meat as well. I also keep a modest garden. I love gardening. I'm not the best gardener, but I love it. And there's a lot about how I run my kitchen in there as well, because I feel like homesteading really starts, especially for me, homesteading starts in the kitchen. So for each of those sections, for eggs, milk, meat, the garden, and in the kitchen, I have a variety of recipes to accompany them, as well as my best tips and kind of how I do things here. And my main goal with writing that book was I had talked to so many people in my travels with McMurray, and I heard so many times from people saying that they were on properties very similar in size to mine, sometimes even bigger, saying that it was too small and they couldn't do anything. And so it really kind of became my personal mission in life to tell people how much you really can accomplish in a small space, and to share how I'm doing it, not because I think my way is the right way, but because, like I said, this process has been largely self-taught for me, and it's been very, very helpful to me to be able to learn from other people and take certain things from their practices that I think will be good on my own farm. And then also a fun thing is that we're giving away a $50 gift card to McMurray Hatchery, which is very fun because pre-orders are open now, so you can get started on your spring flock. And McMurray also has, this is one of the mugs, but there are a bunch to choose from. We have some really beautiful handcrafted mugs that you can, you get to pick one of your own, because my favorite thing in the whole wide world is to wake up in the morning and come out and have a cup of coffee and watch my chickens in the backyard. And I want you to be able to do that too. And then lastly, here's, like I said, my book. This is a QR code. You can scan it to purchase my book. It's with Sawdust Publishing, which is run by Janet Garman of Timber Creek Farm. And Janet is really wonderful. She is a staple in the homesteading community. She is such a wonderful person. And I have had the pleasure of knowing Janet in a working capacity before I ever worked with her as my publisher. I worked with her through McMurray, through editing the blog. And Janet started this publishing company because she was so passionate about making sure that authors had positive experiences with their publisher while they were getting the word out about their books. So not only do I think my book is pretty good, but also I think Janet is a fantastic person to support as well. So you can purchase my book on her website. And here's my contact information. I'll give you a second to write that down or to take a picture of it if you need it. And that is it for my presentation. And now I'm going to exit the screen share. Perfect. So I can do questions.
Okay, great. We do have some questions. So
Perfect.
The first is from Kelsey Murdoch. How far can your hatchery ship? Is Arkansas too far?
No, so we ship all over the 50 United States. The thing about chicks that's really cool is when they're hatching, they consume their yolk. And so they actually will not eat or drink for a full 48 hours typically after they hatch. And that's to account for the fact that not all of the eggs were laid at the same time. So there's a 48-hour stagger in hatching typically. Because the eggs were laid at different times. And so the chicks consume that yolk and then we ship them anywhere. It takes 2 days and then they come to you and they're ready to eat and drink.
Okay. Let's see. Rachel wanted to know your best suggestion on how to beat things like bird mites and keep them at bay.
Dust bathing, offering really good dust baths for your chickens. Especially if they are in, I find that those are more troublesome in number one, situations where you're living in where your chickens are living in a very enclosed space, like an enclosed coop and run. So making sure if they are in an enclosed coop and run, you're offering a really high quality dust bath. I really love wood ash for dust baths. I like to make sure that, so if you have a wood burning stove, you just scoop it out and put it in there. But you can look up all different types of things. And then the other thing is to make sure that you are changing your bedding and cleaning up regularly. That being said, if you are in a battle with mites or lice or whatever it is, any type of external parasite like that, if you are in a battle and they are coming back and back and back, I feel like there is an overwhelming urge at all times to be super crunchy and to never use any sort of chemical substance with your livestock. And I think that sometimes we push that to a detriment and it can be harmful to our livestock. So herbs and natural remedies have their place and they can be great preventatives and they can be very effective sometimes, but sometimes they're not. And that's where modern medicine steps in. And Elector PSP is a really, really effective way to treat for lice and mites. And you just spray it on your hens. And I think you repeat it maybe once every few days for a certain time frame. I'd have to look that up. But it's super effective and there's no shame in using that type of stuff if you have to, because you can and will, if you are having an infestation, you can and will lose hens to external parasites like that.
Okay, that's good to know for sure. Okay, what is one wish I'd known that sooner moment from your own chick raising experience?
Well, I would say I did not have a great brooder set up to begin with. I was just like, oh, I can keep them in a cardboard box forever. You can't and you don't want to. So I was constructing these like mega cardboard boxes in my garage. I was like duct taping multiple cardboard boxes together. And then I got done and I was like, I could have just spent $20 and gone on Facebook Marketplace and gotten something much bigger and better. So that's one for me for sure. Was just like the concept of having a nice solid brooder ready to go from day one. And also, everybody says it, but it's true. You are going to want more chickens. You're going to want more chickens. So the first coop that you buy, make it bigger than what you think you're going to want. And it's worth it to hold out and buy a coop that's super sturdy and well made, and that you think that you are really going to like, that can hold more chickens than it is to buy the first one that you see.
And then what about number of chickens per family member? So if
I'm glad you asked that.
Yeah, like how many do I need?
So I always tell people that I recommend 1 to 2 hens per person, because unless it's even production breeds, they're not going to lay an egg every single day. They're going to lay a lot of eggs every week, but they're not going to lay an egg every single day. So I like to budget 1 to 2 hens per person in your family. But if you eat a lot of eggs, if you bake a lot, if you want to be able to share eggs with families at church, or when you go over to your in-laws, or share them as a hostess gift, or if you are really passionate about preservation, so water glassing eggs or freezing eggs, that's going to be even more hens. But my baseline is 1 to 2 per person, and then a couple more for every activity that you like. So 1 to 2 eggs per person, and then, okay, I really like baking, so I'm going to get 2 more hens. And also, okay, I really want to be able to share eggs with people, so I'm going to get 2 or 4 extra hens, if that makes sense.
How many do you have?
I think right now I probably have, well, we just did a big trim down for fall. So fall, I always, we do a big butcher around, and then I sell all of my 2 and 3-year-olds that aren't like here for retirement. So right now I'm at probably the smallest number I get during the year. I would say I have 2 roosters. I probably have 24 hens, and then I have a trio of silkies as well.
Now, how do you know? Do you just know because you've watched your chickens grow that, okay, these group of chicks are from this order, so you can gauge their age? Or is there a way that you identify them with like a little thing on their leg or something?
I kind of cycle what I do by year, by breed. It's a trick that I learned from this gal out in California. It's called Wiseacre Farms. She's out in California, and it's all pasture based, just eggs. That's all she does. And so every year she changes what breeds she orders. And so I kind of do that too. So every year I have a specific production breed that I want, and I usually do that. And then I have a couple heritage breeds that I want, and that's what I do for that year. And then the next year I do it in different breeds and colors.
Okay, that's a really good idea. I wouldn't have thought of that, because I'm thinking, how do you tell them apart? I mean, it's not like you're getting to be besties with all of them every day. I'm sure they all have their own little personality and stuff.
But yeah, no, that's a totally valid question. Yeah, I just order different breeds and colors on a rotating basis.
Now, is there a common mistake that people make when they're ordering that you wish people would know?
Kind of like I was talking about in the beginning. Number 1, identifying your goals. So if you are just getting chickens like for fun and you don't really care about the eggs, that's one thing. But if you're really serious about eggs, you have to look at breeds that are serious about laying, and also being really aware of your climate and what breeds are suited to survive and thrive in your climate. Chickens are highly adaptable creatures. I have breeds that are Mediterranean breeds, so they're much better suited to be living in a super hot, arid climate. Do I keep them here? Yes. Are they a large part of my flock? No. So you can keep, the odd breed here and there and not have it be that big of a deal. But by and large, if you want to be successful, the biggest mistake to avoid is just buying a chicken because it looks cool or it's pretty, or somebody on Instagram who has it, and really paying attention to the breeds that are going to be beneficial to you and that are going to do well where you live.
Okay. So what breeds have the biggest egg yield?
So like I touched on a little bit before, it's going to be the production breeds. So at McMurray, those are breeds like the Red Star, one of my favorite breeds of chicken. I always have Red Stars in my flock. The Black Star, I like those a little bit less than Red Stars. They're a little bit smaller. I find their eggs to be a little smaller and they're a little bit more shy. Red Stars are just like the fun redhead at a party and they lay a lot of eggs. Like they're just cool chickens. Black Stars are a little bit more reserved. And then we also have Amber Stars. So those are our highest production breeds. We also have Pearl White Leghorns and Whiting True Blues and Greens. I forgot the question that you asked me.
No,
Just talking about breeds.
it was which breeds have the biggest egg yields?
Oh, so those are the best production layers from McMurray. If you're looking at like Tractor Supply, for example, anything with production or hybrid or link in it, like a sex link chicken, those are all high production breeds. But if you're looking at heritage breeds, like if you're really passionate about wanting high production heritage breeds, those are going to be things like your Australorp, your Barred Rock, Rhode Island Red, New Hampshire, those kind of Delawares. Those are pretty good layers too, especially in the winter. So you're going to want to have those types of breeds as your focus if you're really passionate about eggs, but you want to have heritage birds only, because there are some people who don't keep production breeds.
Yeah. I remember when I met you at the conference, we had the catalog and you went through and I said, just tell me to get, and you dog tagged all the pages for me. So I'm ready to go.
Yep.
So, I had somebody ask if you could say the name again of the mite spray that you use if you need to.
Yeah, it's called Elector PSP, Elector PSP. I'm glad someone asked that actually. Here's a hack. It's super expensive. So you can like go in on buying a bottle with your chicken ladies in your area, or the chicken chick is her name. Kathy Shea Mormino, I think is her full name. She is a backyard chicken wealth of knowledge. She actually sells, she like buys big bottles of Elector PSP and then she sells it in individual doses. And I want to say it's like $25. It's under $30. And it's more than one treatment. It's far more than one treatment, especially for a backyard flock if you have less than, less chickens than I do. So you can buy that and she just ships it to your house. And I always have a little bottle of that in my livestock medication cupboard.
Okay. So let's see. Other questions. Do you process the birds yourself? I'm assuming this is any hens that you need to dispatch. Or do you use any of the LEM feather pluckers?
I don't process the hens myself. We have a lot of folks in our community who offer that as a service. So I leave that service up to them. However, when I do process birds at home, I'm from a hunting home. And so I always grew up doing field dressing. And so I don't use pluckers when I process birds at home. I just skin them quick.
You just skin them. Okay. I've heard about that too. So what about toys? Is there anything fun that maybe your kids would enjoy that you could put into the brooder for the baby chicks?
I did mirrors in my first brooder quite a bit. And I had suet block holders that I would put pieces of like lettuce and herbs and stuff in for them to pick at. But that being said, toys are no substitute for the outside world. So if you are in a position where you can do the method that I recommended earlier, where you're bringing them outside during the daytime and allowing them to forage in the grass in an enclosed outdoor transitional brooder and letting them just like be baby chicks outside, that is going to be really, really good for them. But, you have to then carry them back inside at nighttime when it's cold. So those I would say would be my two biggest things if you're worried about the chicks being bored in the brooder. I also used to tie little sachets of herbs and hang them around the brooder for them to pick out. I love giving chicks fresh herbs. It's really good for their immune systems, and they like to pick at them.
And something the kids would enjoy too, I'm sure. Able
Mm-hmm.
to take something out there for them, like a little treat.
Mm-hmm.
Another question we had is, what else is in your chicken medicine cabinet?
What else is in my chicken medicine cabinet? So I have, just off the top of my head right now, black drawing salve is really, really important, especially if you have something like bumblefoot. It's also really good for just like all types of livestock. Mine is from a gal who makes an apothecary online, but you can get it from just like a drugstore. I think Prids, Pridds, is a pretty good brand that I've used before. So I always have black drawing salve. I always have clean scissors, clean gauze, vet wrap, Elector PSP, ivermectin, and a ton of herbs. I would say if you're just getting started with chickens, those are my best recommendations. And also Corid, if you're keeping chicks, that's for if they get coccidiosis. Like I was saying earlier, I feel like the crunchy movement can kind of sometimes be at the detriment to your livestock, and coccidiosis is something that can kill your chicks so fast. So I personally don't vaccinate my chicks, but I do give them the coccidiosis treatment. It's just a spray that they do on the chicks, and then they're good to go. You can feed medicated feed, but in the past, when I was kind of like, you know, ready to die on that hill, and I was like, I'm not going to ever do anything conventional on my livestock, I lost a ton of chicks one year to coccidiosis, and I bought Corid and I used it on them, and the ones that I got it into in time survived. So now I always have Corid just in case. So that's another one too, especially if you're not doing the treatment for coccidiosis. It's not a true vaccination, but if you're not doing it for coccidiosis, then that's something that I would definitely say that you should have in your cabinet as a backup just in case.
How did the hens present so that you would know that it was coccidiosis? Or is it something that you
So
just do preventative?
coccidiosis is actually something that chicks are specifically most susceptible to. So it's a pathogen that all animals have, but it's species specific. So every type of animal has that in their digestive tract, and it's just like an overgrowth, and a deep imbalance in their gut microbiome. And so you see it most frequently in chicks from 0 to 16 weeks, pullets at that age. Generally speaking, once a hen hits maturity, it's extremely unlikely that she's going to have coccidiosis unless her immune system is like super down and there are other things going on. The hallmark signs and symptoms of coccidiosis, though, are they're going to like hunch over, sort of almost look like penguin, like just really hunched and curled over. They're going to be really puffed up. They're going to be sleepy and drowsy. They're not going to be running around and pecking with everybody. They're going to sit hunched over like that with their eyes closed. And then they'll also have bloody stool.
Okay, great. Let's see. One last question. What are your thoughts about those chicken balls where you put a chicken in a ball for protected free ranging?
I think that really depends on your area, because we have like hawks here, hawks and eagles, and I feel that a hawk or an eagle would totally be smart enough to pick one of those up and drop it on a rock somewhere to get the bird out. But if you're in an area where you're dealing with different types of predators that are not aerial, like maybe you just have like, I don't know, cats, like neighborhood cats or something like that, I think that that's worthwhile. But I don't think that those are foolproof. Those are like, if I was going to use those, I would be supervising. I would never leave my chickens out in those, because they're not true predator proofing. And I'm very much a proponent of letting your hens free range as much as possible. That was part of why we moved to this house, was to get goats and to have more space for the chickens. but only if it can be done in a way that makes sense, that doesn't put your hens at great risk. And so if you are finding yourself in a position where you're like, okay, I want a free range, but I feel like I need to put my chicken in one of those contraptions, there are probably better methods of predator protection that you can look towards that are more safe, more, better protection, more secure. There we go. That's the word. More secure than those balls, because a dog could pick that up and shake it, or, like I said, an eagle can pick that up, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I love on the back of your book that I just got today, so I haven't looked at it, but I love Ruth Ann Zimmerman made a little kind of an inspirational quote for you. And if you don't mind, I'd like to share it. It says, Cassidy not only challenges you to turn your backyard into a homestead, but breaks it all down in comprehensive steps that include recipes, animal breed differences, and much more to help you get started. And there's also a little excerpt from Daniel Salatin. So congratulations on your book. Thank you so much for joining us and talking with our group tonight. We just really appreciate it. And anytime you'd like to come back and talk about another topic, we would absolutely love to have you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So that is it for tonight's gathering. We will be back in January. I think it's January 7th. So the first Wednesday in January, come back. We have Beth Doherty from One Cow Revolution. You may have seen Sean, her husband, and her speak at other conferences or online, but she's going to be joining us talking about beating the feed bill blues. So we hope that you come back to join us. Wishing all of you a very happy holiday season. For all you chicken ladies, we have brand new merch in the swag shop, and it's chicken Santa related for the holidays. So go over there and check that out. Again, this will be posted to our YouTube channel in 2 weeks, but it will be on the VIP vault along with Cassidy's presentation and the information to join her drawing. So be sure you enter that so you could win a copy of her book or the fabulous mug or the $50 gift card. So anyway, that's all I have for tonight. Thank you guys so much for joining, and happy holidays, and we'll see you next year.